By the second week of April 1910, the design department of the Imperial German Navy was requesting for the specifications of the 1911 battleship and battlecruiser projects from the General Navy Department. On the 16th of April 1910, the General Navy Department responded, saying it was inappropriate at this point in time. The German Navy was very busy at that point in time due to new technological advancements. The battleship Nassau had just entered service on the 1st of October 1909 and only recently conducted extensive firing trials. Krupp had also just started work on the experimental triple turret mount, which needed to be compared to the Nassau's gunnery arrangement of dual turrets. Maschinenfabrik Augsburg-Nürnberg, MAN for short, had also just started developing large-scale diesel engines, which at this point were unreliable and required further testing. Regardless of these experiments happening in the background, there was one piece of information the German Navy recently obtained that could allow them to start developing the next battlecruisers, and this was based on what was happening across the English Channel. The fact that the Royal Navy was indeed upgunning their battlecruisers to the 13.5-inch gun. It was also recognized that the Royal Navy's battlecruisers were also beginning to slightly up armor. The issue here was that the in-service 28cm gun, which was being applied to the latest battlecruiser, which would become Seydlitz, only had a shell weight of 302 kilograms compared to the 600 kilogram shell of the 13.5-inch gun. It was also believed that the Royal Navy's newest battlecruisers would have an armor belt of no less than 250 millimeters, and at battle ranges of 8,000 meters and higher, the 28cm gun could not reliably penetrate that armor. As a result, Vice Admiral Propulsion argued that the 1911 battlecruisers should upgun to the 30.5cm gun, with no less than 10 barrels being mounted in a centerline or Moltke turret arrangement. During that argument, it was also suggested that the central propeller shaft should have one of the new MAN diesel engines, which shows us that though there were no drawings of this design created, that initially this class of battlecruisers only had 3 propellers rather than 4. On the 11th of May 1910, State Secretary Admiral von Tirpitz held a meeting to discuss the armament and propulsion systems of the 1911 battlecruisers. Firing experiments using the 28cm, 30.5cm, and 32cm guns had just been completed, and it was recommended that the 28cm gun be disbanded and the German Navy used no less than a 30.5cm gun, as the new battlecruisers were also expected to fight in a line against battleships, and the 28cm gun held no chance against a 300mm belt found on Royal Navy battleships. If the new battlecruisers mounted 8 30.5cm guns, there was only a 36-ton increase compared to Seydlitz. Tirpitz was unimpressed by these trials. He did not believe that a battle range of more than 10,000 meters was possible, and he also assumed that battle ranges would quickly reduce. Due to this belief, he was still in favor of retaining 10 28cm guns. Tirpitz asked for opinions, and Vice Admiral Rollman spoke in favor of the 28cm gun, and strangely enough, Vice Admiral Propulsion also supported the 28cm guns, though initially he wanted the 10 30.5cm guns. The reality behind the caliber decision actually came down to finances, as Tirpitz would then point out that the more favorable time to upgun the battlecruisers would be in 1912, as for 1911, battleships had more funding than battlecruisers, and in 1912, battleships would slack and battlecruisers would increase. It was pointed out that even if the 32cm gun was adopted for the battleships of 1911, this did not mean the battlecruisers also needed to be upgunned. Conveniently, at that same time, the 32cm gun was rejected for the 1911 battleships on the foundation of cost. With the gun caliber question having been temporarily decided, Tirpitz moved on to a topic that he viewed as more important, the propulsion system, namely the installation of diesel engines. Tirpitz stated, "The construction of the 1911 ships with diesel engines is the most important of all, and the principal decision now is to solve construction questions. All other questions fade into the background." Members of the design department, namely Berkner and Hollmann, pointed out that it was more important to further advance the development of underwater protection in comparison to altering the propulsion system, which would take up time in redesigning the structure of the ship to mount those engines. It was also pointed out that large-scale diesel engines were not ready for use, and there were no signs to suggest that they would be anytime soon. It was also pointed out that since diesels were being recommended for use on the new battleships, that would cause even further delays in development. Tirpitz acknowledged these issues, but he was still in favor of the diesel engine. With a few basic parameters having been decided during the early to mid-May 1910 meetings, they were sent off to the construction department, whom quickly rejected any designs with 528cm guns and diesel engines, as they proved to have no advantages over the preceding 3 battlecruisers. As a result, they directed the design department to create alternative designs with 30.5cm guns and steam turbines. The rejected 1910 cruiser projects 3C and 4E were utilized to lay the foundation to the first design, and they created a ship with 4 30.5cm turrets in the Von der Tann arrangement. Grosse Cruiser K Design 1 was sent to Tirpitz, and after seeing it, he acknowledged that upgunning to the 30.5cm gun was now necessary, but he retained that he wanted diesel engines. Back on the 28th of February 1910, the German Navy signed a contract with MAN for an experimental 6,000 horsepower 3-cylinder diesel motor. On the 1st of September 1910, the chief of engine installations from the construction department told Tirpitz that the large diesel engines were not yet ripe to consider for installment. This is when Tirpitz realized that the diesel engine could not be completed in time for either the battleships or battlecruisers of 1911, and that those ships would have to be designed with steam turbines only. The next day, on the 2nd of September, a memorandum was completed that states the Grosse Cruiser K to receive 30.5cm guns as heavy armament in 4 double turrets. His Excellency the Herr State Secretary, Tirpitz, wants the opportunity to go to 5 30.5cm double turrets should this be considered. This was eventually rejected due to displacement increases and cost increases. The memorandum continues. The centerline position should be used for the 4 twin turrets. If the second and third turrets can fire over the first and fourth turrets, so that 4 heavy guns can fire directly ahead, just as directly astern. If this is not quite possible, the Von der Tann arrangement should be taken up. On the 22nd of September 1910, 3 designs were put forward for consideration, designs 1, 2, and 3. The aforementioned design 1 was basically a massive Von der Tann. Design 2 had all of the main battery turrets on a centerline arrangement, with the third and fourth turrets having a gap between them for engine installations, which saved the ship 1 compartment in length, and the ship's design also had the exact same armor values as the Seydlitz. Finally, Design 3 also had all of the main battery turrets on the centerline, though this time there was no gap between the third and fourth turrets, so the ship was slightly longer. The secondary casemates were also placed on the upper deck within the superstructure, rather than being fixed out to the side of the hull. A personal note, I believe that this design is very reminiscent of what would eventually become the Bayern-class battleships. The ammunition loadout between the 3 ships was the exact same. Each 30.5cm gun would have 90 shells, each 15cm gun would have 160 shells, and each 8.8cm gun would have 250 shells. This meeting would see that designs 2 and 3 were the favorable, but they were combined, so the Design 2 gunnery arrangement was selected. However, the secondary casemate arrangement of Design 3 was placed on Design 2. This resulted on Design 4, which was sent off to the Kaiser, and he subsequently approved it on the 26th of September 1910. On the 18th of March 1911, the construction department decided to improve the design even further through a series of alterations, which would result in Design 5. The Schwischen deck was deleted, which allowed the compartment heights to be increased above the armored deck, which also allowed the coal capacity to be increased to 4,200 tons. There were 2 positives to these increases. The habitability of the ship was not impacted, meaning crew spaces were unaffected by these alterations, but the ship was lower in the water, meaning it was less visible to enemies. Designs 4B and 5 would also utilize a pure longitudinal frame system, which increased the strength of the hull, but did not increase its mass. The boilers and boiler room layout would also be altered going from Design 4 to 5. Design 5 introduced 12 boiler rooms laid out in pairs of 2, running across 6 compartments. The forwardmost boiler room would have 2 boilers, while the remainder would have 4. There was a serious drawback to Design 5, though. Its metacentric height was 2.8, which gave the ship a roll period of 10.5 seconds. This was a rapid and sharp roll period, which was good for overall stability of the vessel, but it made gunnery difficult as guns required the most stable platform possible, which this metacentric height did not offer. The Germans wanted to reduce the metacentric height down to 1.8 meters, and in order to do this, they had to remove 2 meters from the ship's overall beam. As a result, the underwater defense system would lose 1 meter of distance on each side, which meant that the system was worse off. It was also recognized that the rather choppy waves of the North Atlantic required a higher metacentric height, so reducing the metacentric height was unfavorable, but in order to get better gunnery, it was necessary. New alternatives had to be explored without impacting the metacentric height, and this was done through the Fromm anti-roll tanks and bilge keels. Up to that point, the only battlecruiser Germany constructed with Fromm anti-roll tanks was von der Thahn. This increased the cost of the ship slightly, and it also meant that the ship had to be slightly larger to contain the Fromm roll tanks, which meant for Design 5 the Citadel would have to be increased in length by at least 3 meters. In turn, the installation of bilge keels would add mass and drag to the ship's lower hull, resulting in a reduction in speed. On the 30th of March 1911, a meeting was held where Designs 4, 4A, 4B, and 5 would be pinned up against each other, and various members of the German Navy would point out pros and cons of the designs. Ultimately, it was decided that an improved form of Design 5 was necessary. It was recommended that the height of Turret 4's barbette be increased by 0.2 meters. The ship's armor system would have to suffer sacrifices in certain locations, namely the torpedo bulkhead or the bow armor. And finally, the secondary casemates would have to be extended back out to meet the edge of the hull. Tirpitz was okay with 2 of the 3 requirements. He was unhappy with the suggestion of reducing any of the armor. Reducing the torpedo bulkhead theoretically made the ship more vulnerable to underwater explosions, while reducing the bow armor theoretically made the bow more vulnerable to shell fire. A discussion occurred regarding the impact of shells striking the hull of the armor scheme as applied on Design 5, and Holman from the design department stated, "One must expect that the ship will fill with water forward, leaks will occur that cannot be sealed with the means available on board, the ship's outer hull, to which the armor is secured, will undoubtedly leak, and the forecastle ahead of the Citadel will certainly fill, and could not be kept drained with the means available on board." As a result of this meeting, Design 5B was produced. It incorporated Fromm anti-roll tanks and bilge keels. It had 4 propellers with 2 centerline rudders. It had the casemates moved outboard. The torpedo bulkhead's thickness was reduced from 50 millimeters to 45 millimeters, and 6 of the coal-fed boilers were replaced by 4 oil-fired boilers. As a result of the boiler alterations, 3,200 tons of coal would be carried, while 1,000 tons of oil would be carried. This would ultimately save the ship 80 tons in displacement. During the summer of 1911, Design 5B was sent off to the Kaiser, and he subsequently approved it, and a contract was signed with Blum and Voss on the 5th of September 1911 for the construction of the ship, and hull number 213 was laid down on the 30th of March 1912. The first attempt to launch the hull occurred on the 14th of June 1913, but after moving 35 centimeters, the central sledge got jammed, and the hull was stuck on the ways until the 12th of July 1913, when the problem was addressed, and it could finally be launched. At noon on the 1st of September 1914, the ship was commissioned into the Imperial German Navy as Derfflinger On an unknown date, a contract for a second vessel was signed with Ferdinand Schickau at Danzig, and hull number 885 was laid down on the 15th of May, 1912. The hull was launched on the 29th of November, 1913, and completed on the 8th of August, 1915, being commissioned as Lutzow. Finally, on the 20th of April 1913, a contract was signed with the Imperial Dockyards at Wilhelmshaven for the construction of the third and final ship. Hull number 34 would be laid down on the 1st of October 1913, launched on the 1st of August 1915, and commissioned on the 10th of May 1917. This would be the final battlecruiser commissioned into the German Navy, and it would bear the name Hindenburg. The Derfflinger class battlecruisers are often looked at as the best of their type, and their designs and service histories definitely support that claim. Unfortunately for these three ships, Derfflinger was the only one to have a somewhat lengthy, but certainly glorious career, as Lutzow was sunk during the Battle of Jutland, and Hindenburg was completed too late. Regardless, these were most certainly excellent additions into the German Navy. With that having been said, there's no more to add on to this topic for today. So, if you have learned something new in this video, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.